Hi there, my name's Ewan Nicholson. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Remembering Love. The title of today's video is How Do We Reduce the Volume of the Inner Critic? And this is part 3 of a 4-part series. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2 already, I'm going to put a link in the description below. In part 1, we looked at what is the inner critic, why do we have one? In part 2, we looked at how do you tell the difference between our conscience and our inner critic. And today, in part 3, we're going to be looking at the question of why positive affirmations aren't enough when it comes to really turning down the volume of the inner critic. So let's get started. You may have noticed in the title, I wrote why positive affirmations are not enough. So I'm not going to dump my inner critic on this and say they're terrible, they're useless, or they're pointless or redundant. Rather, it's more an understanding that they have some value, they can help here and there. But when it comes to really dealing with the intensity and volume of an inner critic that's loud, that's kind of dominating your life, just employing positive affirmations, you'll find, in my experience at least, just isn't enough. And let's look at why that is, and also what is enough, which we'll come to. So it kind of makes sense. You're at a point in your life where you suddenly become aware that I have this negative self-talk. I have this inner critic that's saying negative things about me. And I'm kind of a little bit fed up of it. I'm a little bit tired of this kind of negative self-talk. And I come across, Louise Hay or the law of attraction or something that has this emphasis on positive affirmations. And it kind of makes sense. Here am I saying to myself, I'm a loser. And I can replace that with, I'm a winner. Here am I saying, I'm not worthy of being loved. And I can replace that with saying, I am worthy of being loved, etc., etc., etc. So we get an understanding of this and we start on this journey of using positive affirmations to turn down the volume of our inner critic. So you get in front of a mirror and you say, I am lovable and I am successful and I am worthy of good things, etc., etc. Now for me at least, when I started this, it just brought up this massive level of cringiness and discomfort and like, oh God, just it feels uncomfortable. But the logic is I've been so used to saying negative things about myself, complimenting myself or validating myself feels so foreign that of course it's going to feel uncomfortable. And the way to get over that discomfort is persistence, is just keep doing it, and eventually it's almost like I'm going to trick myself into believing that I am worthy and I am lovable if I just say it enough, often enough. And that is, you might say, the logic of using positive affirmations. And in my experience, it just doesn't really kind of work. And ultimately, it's a superficial remedy for a fundamental problem. What you're trying to do is replace one voice, a negative voice, with a positive voice without a real understanding of that negative voice is not just a voice in of itself. It is an expression, a tip of an iceberg that runs deep, deep into our history, deep, deep into our physiology, into our psychology, and just layering a voice of positivity on top of it just will not be enough. So let me introduce you to someone. Let me introduce you to the voice of my self-worth. Now, in part 2, you heard the voice of my inner critic, and he was quite a negative guy. And now you're going to hear the voice of my positivity, the voice of my self-worth, and you'll get a sense of, what he's all about. So let's bring him up with the magic of video and see what he has got to say. So who are you?
I'm the voice of your inner self-worth.
Okay, so what's with the red shirt and the hat?
Well, the hat, that's just kind of part of my personality. Just makes me a little bit different, a little bit special. And the shirt is red and it's bright, like my voice.
Okay, good to hear. So what's your deal? What's your thing?
Well, my deal is I'm here to give you self-worth. I'm here to tell you all the great things about you, all the things that make you special and important and lovable. That's my job as the voice of self-worth.
And why do you speak weird?
I don't know why I'm speaking in a weird voice.
Okay, so tell me something special about me.
Well, you're special. You're very special.
Okay, like a unicorn special?
Well, I'm not special like a unicorn, more like special like everyone's special.
Well, that doesn't make me very special, if everyone's special.
Okay, let's not get into details. You're special. You're lovable. You're an amazing person. You've got a big heart. I just want to give you a big hug.
I don't know if I believe you, to be honest.
Well, don't listen to that voice of the inner critic. He's very mean, don't you think?
He is very mean, and you're very nice, to be honest.
I know, I'm very positive. That's my job. I'm here to tell you positive, warm, and endearing things about yourself.
I don't know, I'm not really sure if I'm buying what you're selling.
Well, of course, you may not believe me. You're listening to that inner critic. Listen to me. You are special. You are important.
Why are you shouting?
Well, sometimes I feel if I shout a bit louder, you might listen.
Okay, well, look, thanks for your time.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye, toodles. So there is the voice of my inner self-worth. Now, maybe the voice of your inner self-worth isn't as cringy as mine, but that's kind of my experience of the voice of my self-worth. It feels like it's a little forced. It feels a little fake. I mean, I have like 40 years of cynicism and negative self-talk, and then there's this chirpy little voice that comes in and tries to tell me all these positive things. And I just feel like, you know what, I just don't really buy it. I don't really get it. It doesn't even make sense. You know, it's just, it feels fake. And the reason that that is the case, now, could be my inner critic responding to that voice, but it's also just a sense of, like, it's not just my inner critic. It's also this feeling that you just can't come out of nowhere after 40, 45 years, 35 years and start saying positive things about yourself and expect yourself to believe that. You know, these changes to the inner critic have to come from the origin of the inner critic. You know, if we really want to fundamentally change that voice, you know, we have to go to the origin of where it arises from, the fear, the shame, how it affects our physiology, how it's baked into our operating system from a very, very early age. And trying to just put a layer of paint on cracks in the walls just won't work. Because if what's happening is you have a house and your paint starts to crack and you think it's the paint and you think it's the type of paint, and you suddenly just then, you know, put pink paint or yellow paint, and you keep putting these layers of paint and the cracks keep appearing, and you're wondering, what the hell, why isn't this working? And what you've missed is that these cracks appearing in the paint are appearing in the wall, that they're to do with the foundations being unstable. And it doesn't matter how many layers of paint you use or whatever it is you're using, unless you address the fundamental issue, those cracks and that paint problem is still going to keep occurring. And this is really what's important to understand, is that the voice of the inner critic is a symptom of something deeper. Because it's not the voice of the words, you are a loser, or you are pathetic, or you are not worthy of being loved. What it really is about is the charge, the emotional charge that that sentence has. If someone comes up to you and says, you're made out of blue cheese, okay, it's neither here nor there. You're not going to dislike it or like it. It's just going to seem absurd. But if someone comes up to you and says, you're ugly, or you're grotesque, and that feels like it's connected to a self-perception of grotesqueness or ugliness, what's really happening is there's a charge to those words. There's an emotional fear and shame that's attached to that. And the process of reducing the volume of the inner critic is the process of discharging that energy, of replacing that energy, of understanding that energy. And if there is a voice of self-love and self-compassion that arises, it has to arise from that depth. It can't just be layered on top. It won't be sustainable and it won't work. And we're also coming from an understanding that we're really trying to develop self-compassion rather than self-esteem. And there's a woman, Kristin Neff, that's written a book about self-compassion that kind of explores this in more detail. I'll put a link in below, which is understanding that, you know, self-esteem in the sense of building ourselves up as a counterpoint to bringing ourselves down is just a kind of can be in the end a kind of a narcissistic counterpoint to the real solution, which is self-compassion, you know, which is really, that has to come from our depths. It can't just be another voice inside our thinking. So, you know, when it comes to really looking at positive affirmations, the challenge that we have is how do we get to the depths of this? How do we elicit change that comes from a deeper place rather than a superficial place? And also, it comes from understanding that, look, what we're trying to do when it comes to dealing with the inner critic is we're working to transcend it rather than just replace it. We're looking to really understand it rather than just, delete it. And this is a fundamentally different view from just, I need to replace my negative self-talk with a positive self-talk. What we're trying to do is to look at, say, well, how do we bring it into the fold? How do we reduce its volume by understanding it within a wider sense of our being and a wider sense of who we are as people? So the inner critic is allowed to stay there. It's allowed to have a place at the table. It just doesn't dominate anymore, and we just give it less authority, but we're not trying to delete it or kill it or replace it or mute it. We're trying to really understand it and really transcend it. And that is different from just laying on positive affirmations. So the next question then is, well, how the hell do we do that? And that's what I'm going to be looking at in the next video in part 4. What are the 5 practical steps I can give you that have helped for me that really look at reducing the volume of the inner critic? So stay tuned for that. Now, if you've had an experience, positive or negative, with positive affirmations, please leave it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And thank you for listening, and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.